I never thought that doing something good could turn into the biggest heartbreak of my life. When I bought my grandmother a $3 million retirement home, I wasn't thinking about money, property, or even recognition. I was thinking about love, about the woman who raised me when no one else did, the woman who sacrificed everything just so I could have a future. Growing up, she didn't have much, but she always had faith, and that faith built the person I became. So when I finally made enough to give her the kind of life she deserved, it felt like everything had come full circle. I wanted to see her happy, safe, and comfortable in her final years. But what happened next turned that dream into a nightmare I never saw coming. It all started with the house, a beautiful, sunlit home just outside the city. It had a wraparound porch, tall oak trees, and a garden that reminded my grandmother of her childhood in the South. When I showed her the place, she cried. Those soft tears that fall when someone's heart is too full to speak. I can still remember her words that day. She said, "Baby, you've made my dream come true." And in that moment, I thought I had. I didn't know that behind those peaceful walls, jealousy and greed were already waiting to tear us apart. My grandmother, being who she was, wanted the whole family to feel welcome there. She invited everyone over, my cousins, aunts, even my brother and his wife, Alicia. At first, everything was fine. We'd have Sunday dinners together, sit on the porch, and watch her hummingbirds come and go. It felt like we were healing old wounds, rebuilding that sense of family we'd lost after years of distance. But soon I started noticing small things. The way Alicia always asked about the house, about who owned it, how much it cost, and whose name was on the deed. The way she'd look at me when my grandmother called me her rock. I brushed it off as curiosity, not realizing she was already planning something I couldn't imagine. I didn't buy the house to show off or gain control. I bought it out of love, plain and simple. My grandmother was the heart of our family, and all I wanted was to make her happy. But when money enters the picture, even love can get twisted. Alicia had a way of talking that made people believe she cared, but deep down she always had an angle. My brother Marcus didn't see it. He thought she was just being helpful, especially when she offered to help Grandma organize the paperwork and update her estate. I remember warning him, telling him to be careful with those kinds of things, but he brushed me off. "You always think someone's out to get you," he said. I wish I'd pushed harder. Weeks passed and life went on as usual. My grandmother was thriving. She'd take long walks in the garden, host church friends for tea, and even started a small book club with her neighbors. It made my heart full seeing her that way. Then one day she called me, her voice trembling. She said something strange, something about signing papers she didn't fully understand. She thought it was for maintenance on the house, but something in her tone didn't sit right with me. I drove straight over, heart pounding, but when I got there, Alicia was already gone. The table was covered in papers, and my grandmother looked confused, almost scared. She said Alicia told her it was just standard homeowner stuff. I took those papers straight to my lawyer, and that's when everything came crashing down. The deed, the legal document that proved ownership of the house, had been changed. My name was gone. Replaced. Somehow, my grandmother's signature had been used to transfer the property into a joint title, one that included Alicia's name. My hands went cold. My stomach twisted. I couldn't believe it. How could she do that? How could my own brother's wife take something so pure and turn it into something so ugly? I remember confronting Marcus that night. I went to their house, shaking with anger, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. He looked at me like I was the problem, like I was attacking his wife without reason. Alicia stood there, calm as ever, pretending to be confused. "It's just a misunderstanding," she said sweetly. "I was helping Mama with her documents." I wanted to scream. But Marcus sided with her. He told me to stop causing drama, that Grandma must have agreed to it. That hurt more than anything. I had worked for years to build a life, to give something beautiful back to the woman who raised us both, and now it was slipping away because of lies. From that day on, the atmosphere in the family changed. Grandma was heartbroken. She could feel the tension but didn't understand the full picture. She blamed herself, saying she never meant to cause trouble. I tried to reassure her, but deep down I was furious, not just at Alicia but at Marcus for letting her do it. For choosing greed over family. Every time I looked at that house now, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. The next few months were filled with legal meetings, family arguments, and sleepless nights. I tried to fight it, to get the house deed back in my name, but the process was long and messy. My lawyer said it looked like Grandma's signature was forged, but proving that wasn't simple. I had to walk a fine line between protecting her and not breaking her heart by revealing how deep the betrayal ran. All while Alicia kept pretending like nothing happened, showing up to family dinners, smiling like she hadn't just stolen everything we worked for. Every time I saw her sitting at that dining table in the house I bought for my grandmother, I had to bite my tongue. There were moments when I thought about walking away completely, just letting it go for the sake of peace. But then I'd see my grandmother sitting on that porch looking out at the sunset, and I knew I couldn't give up. Not after everything she'd done for me. I started digging deeper, collecting every document, every text, every conversation that could prove what really happened. And that's when I found something that changed everything I thought I knew about my family and even about myself. It wasn't just Alicia. There was someone else helping her. Someone I never expected. That discovery would turn my world upside down, forcing me to make a choice I never wanted to make. Between protecting my grandmother's peace and exposing the truth that could destroy what was left of our family. And the worst part? The deeper I went, the more I realized that the house wasn't the only thing she wanted. That's when everything started to spiral, and that's where the real story begins. The night after I found out someone else was involved, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying every conversation, every strange look, every moment that didn't make sense before. I sat in my car outside my grandmother's house until sunrise, just thinking. I watched the lights flicker on inside as she woke up, her slow movements gentle and peaceful. She didn't deserve this. None of it. And yet, somehow, she was in the middle of a mess that wasn't even hers to begin with. The house, the deed, the betrayal, it all hung over her like a storm cloud she didn't see coming. I started tracing back everything from the day I bought that house. I remembered how excited Grandma had been, how she'd insisted on showing Marcus and Alicia every single room. She said she wanted family close, wanted everyone to feel at home there. I didn't know that open door would be the same one someone would use to walk right in and take advantage of her trust. Marcus and I had always been different. He was the quiet one growing up, steady, dependable, the type people didn't expect trouble from. I was the dreamer, the one always chasing something bigger. When our parents split, Grandma took both of us in. She worked double shifts, cooked for us, kept the roof over our heads, and never once complained. We promised her that one day we'd take care of her like she took care of us. But now, looking back, I realized I was the only one who truly meant it. Alicia came into the picture a few years ago. She was smart, confident, and always carried herself like she knew more than everyone else in the room. At first, I tried to get along with her for Marcus's sake. But there was something about her energy, something sharp beneath that polished smile. She had a way of making everything about her, twisting words just enough to make you second-guess yourself. Still, I never imagined she'd go this far. After the lawyer told me about the forged signature, I couldn't just sit and wait. I needed proof, something solid. I started going through all the old files and documents related to the house. Receipts, emails, text messages. I even called the realtor who handled the purchase to see if they'd noticed anything strange. Nothing seemed out of place at first. Then I found something small, an email confirmation for a notary visit I never requested. It was scheduled for a day I was out of town. The address listed wasn't the house, it was Marcus's place. That was my first real clue. I tried not to jump to conclusions, but the pieces started fitting together in ways I didn't like. Someone had arranged for my grandmother to sign papers without my knowledge, papers that changed everything. And that person couldn't have done it alone. That's when it hit me, the person helping Alicia wasn't a stranger. It was someone close enough to access the documents, to convince Grandma it was all routine. Someone she trusted completely. My chest tightened as I thought of all the possibilities. My aunt who often helped Grandma with her mail. My cousin who worked at a local law office. Or maybe, Marcus himself. That was the part one didn't want to believe. My brother, the same person I grew up with, sharing meals, secrets, and struggles. But his behavior lately, it didn't feel like the same Marcus anymore. He was distant, defensive, and every time I brought up the house, he'd change the subject or get angry. I went to see Grandma later that day. She was in her garden, trimming her roses, humming softly to herself. When she saw me, her face lit up like always, but there was something behind her smile, something heavy. "You've been quiet lately," she said, her voice gentle but knowing. I told her I'd been busy, that I was just trying to straighten some things out. But she knew. She always knew. I sat down next to her on the porch swing, and for a long moment, neither of us said anything. The wind carried the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't bring myself to. I didn't want her to feel the weight of what was happening. She'd spent her whole life holding this family together. I couldn't be the one to break her heart now. Then she said something that stuck with me. "Baby, when people start showing you who they are, don't argue with them. Believe them the first time." Her words hit hard. Maybe she didn't know the full story, but deep down, she understood that something wasn't right. Over the next few weeks, I started keeping a closer eye on things. I visited the county clerk's office to request all the official documents on the property. When I compared them to my copies, I noticed small differences. Dates, initials, even the ink looked off. Someone had been smart about it, making changes so subtle they almost slipped past me. But the more I looked, the more it became clear this wasn't a simple mistake. It was planned. Around that same time, I got a call from one of Grandma's neighbors. She said she'd seen a car parked outside the house late at night, Alicia's car. I couldn't understand why she'd be there when Grandma was asleep. When I asked Grandma about it the next morning, she looked surprised. "I thought she came by to drop off some groceries," she said. That's when I realized Alicia wasn't just after the house. She was making moves behind the scenes, trying to control everything connected to it. I started feeling like I was living in two worlds. On the surface, things looked calm. Family dinners, polite smiles, the illusion of peace. But underneath, there was tension so thick it could choke you. I could see it in the way Marcus avoided eye contact, in the way Alicia's compliments felt too sweet, too forced. Even Grandma seemed to sense it. She stopped inviting them over as often, saying she needed more quiet time. One evening, I decided to confront Marcus again, but this time I wanted to be calm. I invited him to meet at a cafe somewhere neutral. At first we talked about normal things, work, family, memories. Then I brought up the house. His expression changed instantly. He leaned back, arms crossed, and said, "You're still on that? Let it go already." "Let it go?" I asked. "They changed the deed, Marcus. My name is gone. You think I should just forget that?" He avoided my eyes, fidgeting with his phone. "You're overreacting. Alicia was just helping Grandma manage things." That word, helping, made my stomach twist. I told him what I'd found. The fake notary appointment, the altered paperwork, everything. For a split second, I thought I saw guilt flash across his face. But then he covered it up, shaking his head. "You're looking for someone to blame," he said quietly. "Maybe you just can't stand that Grandma trusts someone else too." That was the moment I knew something was really wrong. The brother I once knew would have been furious, would have fought beside me to fix it. But this Marcus? He was protecting her. Maybe even protecting himself. After that meeting, things between us were never the same. Calls went unanswered, texts left unread. Alicia stopped speaking to me altogether. It was as if they were closing ranks, building a wall around themselves. And Grandma, caught in the middle, started pulling away from everyone, as if she could feel her family tearing apart. I kept digging, desperate to find something concrete. Then one night, while going through the property records again, I found a document that didn't belong. An older one, dated months before I bought the house. It was a draft of a will. My grandmother's will. And on that paper, there was a name that shouldn't have been there at all. That's when I realized this wasn't just about the house anymore. Someone had been planning this long before I even made the purchase. And the deeper I went, the closer I came to uncovering a truth that could destroy everything I thought I knew about my family. But I wasn't ready for what came next. Because the person connected to that document was someone I never imagined would betray me. I stared at the old will in disbelief, the paper trembling slightly in my hands. The ink was faded, but the names were clear as day: my grandmother, Marcus, and my Aunt Loretta. My chest tightened as I read through the details. It mentioned a transfer of property and some vague wording about future assets and shared ownership. None of it made sense at first. The date on the document was months before I even bought the $3 million home. Why would there be an old draft mentioning property that didn't exist back then? And more importantly, what did Aunt Loretta have to do with all this? Loretta had always been close to Grandma, almost like a second daughter. She lived just a few blocks away and helped out whenever Grandma needed something. She handled her mail, her doctor appointments, even her bank errands when Grandma's knees started bothering her. I trusted her completely, or at least I used to. Now, seeing her name on that document made everything feel off. I decided to visit her the next morning, hoping to clear things up. She greeted me like always, warm smile, a hug that smelled like cinnamon and fabric softener. But I could tell something was different. When I brought up the will, her expression froze for a split second before she composed herself. "Oh, that old thing?" she said lightly, waving her hand. "Your grandmother had me draft something years ago just in case. It doesn't mean anything now." Her voice was calm, but I noticed how she avoided eye contact. It was the same way Marcus did when he was hiding something. My gut told me she knew more than she was letting on. I tried to press further, asking if she knew anything about the deed changes or the notary appointment at Marcus's house. She hesitated, then sighed. "I think you're looking for trouble that isn't there," she said. "Alicia just wanted to make sure your grandmother's affairs were organized. Maybe things got a little mixed up, but no one's out to hurt you. The way she said it made my skin crawl. It sounded rehearsed, like a line she'd practiced. I left her house that day more confused than before. It felt like everyone around me was reading from the same script, pretending nothing was wrong while quietly keeping secrets. The following week, I noticed Grandma had become quieter. She wasn't her usual cheerful self. She spent more time sitting by the window, lost in thought, as if something was weighing on her mind. One afternoon, I found her looking through old photo albums, her eyes glossy with emotion. When I asked what was wrong, she said softly, "I just don't recognize this family anymore. Everyone's hiding something." Her words cut deep. I wanted to tell her everything I knew, but she was so fragile and I didn't want to add to her stress. Instead, I promised her that I'd take care of everything, no matter what it took. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that Loretta was somehow connected to Alicia's plan. Maybe she'd helped with the paperwork or convinced Grandma to sign something without realizing what it was. I started thinking about all those times Loretta insisted on handling Grandma's mail or setting up her appointments. Suddenly made sense. She had access to everything: documents, identification, even financial statements. If anyone could have made this happen quietly, it was her. I decided to dig deeper, starting with the notary records. After a few calls and a bit of persistence, I managed to track down the notary who'd supposedly handled the transfer. When I asked about the appointment, he confirmed the date but said something that made my blood run cold. He claimed he'd met with Mrs. Walker, my grandmother, and her niece, Loretta. Not Alicia. Not Marcus. Loretta. That changed everything. If Loretta was the one who arranged the paperwork, then Alicia and Marcus might have been only part of the story. Or maybe Loretta had her own reasons I didn't yet understand. I started to wonder if this was about more than just the house. Maybe there was something in Grandma's estate, some money or asset none of us knew about. The more I thought about it, the more the puzzle pieces started to shift. I remembered hearing Grandma once mention an old piece of land she owned in Georgia, something her late husband left behind decades ago. She'd said it wasn't worth much, just sentimental. But what if it was? What if that land had value now? And what if someone had found out? While I was trying to connect the dots, Marcus called me out of the blue. His tone was sharp, defensive. "You've been asking questions," he said. "Why can't you just drop it? You're making things worse." "Worse for who?" I shot back. "You or the people lying to Grandma?" He was silent for a moment before he said something that shook me. "You don't know everything, okay? There are things you don't understand." Then he hung up. That one line kept replaying in my head. What didn't I understand? Was he trying to protect someone, or protect himself? The next day, I went back to Grandma's house, determined to check through every document she had. While she napped, I went through her file cabinet, carefully flipping through folders. Most of it was old bills, letters, and receipts, but tucked inside an envelope marked "Property, Confidential," I found a stack of papers I'd never seen before. They weren't about the new house. They were about that old land in Georgia. The documents showed something shocking. It had recently been sold. A buyer's name was listed, but it wasn't my grandmother's signature on the sale agreement. It was Loretta's. My breath caught. She'd sold the land, probably without Grandma even knowing. But why? And where did that money go? It was becoming clearer that this wasn't just about one property. This was about control over everything Grandma owned. The house was only one piece of a much bigger plan. Later that evening, I got another call, this time from Grandma's pastor. He told me Loretta had stopped by the church earlier that week, asking for advice about family conflicts over inheritance. She said she was worried about tension between me and Marcus. That's when it hit me, she wasn't just involved. She was controlling the whole story, shaping how everyone saw me. I started feeling like the walls were closing in. No matter what I did, they were always one step ahead, covering their tracks, twisting the truth. Grandma's trust in them made it hard to act without looking like the bad guy. I couldn't accuse anyone outright, not without proof that couldn't be denied. Days turned into weeks, and I watched as the family pretended everything was normal. Loretta brought over homemade pie like nothing had happened. Marcus mowed Grandma's lawn. Alicia smiled and asked how work was going. It was a performance, and I was the only one who knew the script wasn't real. But one evening, as I sat on the porch with Grandma, she handed me an envelope. "I think you should see this," she said softly. Inside was a handwritten note from Loretta, dated just a few days earlier. It read, "I hope you'll understand why we had to do what we did. It's for the best. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." My hands shook as I read those words. Whatever they were planning wasn't over. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. And as I looked at my grandmother sitting quietly beside me, I realized that time was running out to protect her, and to uncover the truth before it was too late. The night after my grandmother handed me Loretta's note, I couldn't stop reading it. Every line felt like a quiet threat wrapped in polite words. It's for the best. That sentence haunted me the most. For whose best? It definitely wasn't for Grandma's. My mind raced through every possibility, every hidden motive. Something much bigger was happening and I was standing right in the middle of it. The next morning I decided I couldn't just sit around anymore. I needed to confront this head-on. I went to see Loretta again, but this time I didn't call first. Her car was in the driveway, but when she opened the door, the surprise on her face said everything. "You should have called, baby," she said, forcing a smile. "I was just about to head out." "I think we need to talk," I said, stepping inside before she could stop me. The air inside was thick, like tension had been living there too long. I pulled out the note she'd written to Grandma and laid it on her table. "You want to tell me what this means?" Her smile faded. For the first time, I saw something crack in her calm expression. "I don't know what you think you're doing," she said slowly, "but you're stirring up a storm that doesn't need to happen. Loretta, you sold Grandma's land. You changed the deed to her house. And now you're sending her messages telling her not to interfere. What storm are you talking about? The one you started?" Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the paper, but I pulled it back. "You wouldn't understand," she whispered. "There are things Grandma didn't tell you." That sentence hit me hard. "Like what?" I demanded. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out, her voice quieter now. "Sometimes people do the wrong things for the right reasons." I didn't buy it. Not after everything that had happened. I left her house that day with more questions than answers, my mind spinning. If there was something Grandma hadn't told me, what could it possibly be? When I got back to Grandma's house, she was sitting on the porch, watching the sky turn pink and gold. She looked peaceful, but I could tell she knew I'd been digging. I sat next to her, and for a long time we just listened to the crickets. Finally, I asked, "Grandma, is there something you haven't told me? Something about the land or the house?" She turned to me, her eyes full of sadness. "There are things from long ago that I never wanted to burden you with," she said softly. "Your grandfather left more than just that little piece of land. There were investments, money tied up in old trusts, things I never touched because I didn't need them." "So Loretta knew?" She nodded. "She was supposed to help me sort it out years ago, but I guess she saw it differently." That confirmed it. This wasn't about family misunderstanding or simple greed. It was about hidden wealth. Something they'd been quietly planning to control for years. The house, the land, even Grandma's will, they were all pieces of the same plan. From that moment, I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I needed real proof, something no one could deny. I started documenting everything. The altered documents, the note, the notary statement, even recorded conversations. Every detail mattered now. As the days passed, the tension grew heavier. Marcus stopped visiting completely, and Alicia acted like I didn't exist. Grandma sensed the divide and kept trying to keep the peace, but it was like a quiet war had broken out in our family. The house that was supposed to be a gift had become a place of whispered secrets and unspoken anger. One night, I decided to check the security cameras I'd installed around the property when Grandma first moved in. I hadn't looked at the footage in months, but something told me to. As I scrolled through the recordings, I froze. There, on a recent night, was Alicia's car pulling into the driveway again, long after midnight. She got out, walked to the porch, and unlocked the front door with a spare key. Then she went inside for nearly half an hour. My heart raced. What was she doing there when Grandma was asleep? I kept watching, my stomach twisting. When she came back out, she was holding a small box, the same one Grandma kept her important papers in. I felt my throat go dry. That box had the original deed, the will, and other personal documents. The next morning, I checked the drawer where Grandma kept it. It was gone. I called Marcus right away, demanding answers, but he hung up before I could finish my sentence. That was all I needed to know. They weren't even hiding anymore. For the next few days, I barely slept. Every noise outside the house made me jump. I knew they were planning something, maybe to finalize whatever deal they'd been working on behind my back. I couldn't let that happen. One evening, I got a call from my lawyer. He'd found something buried in the property records, an active transfer request filed just days earlier, moving the ownership of the house to a new family trust under Loretta's name. My name and Grandma's were nowhere on it. The filing wasn't complete yet, but it would be soon. I had less than 48 hours before the house I bought for my grandmother, the home that symbolized everything she meant to me, would no longer belong to either of us. I felt the weight of it all crash down. Every sacrifice, every late night working to afford that house, every smile on Grandma's face when she first walked through the doors, it was all about to be stolen. That night, as the rain poured down outside, I sat in my car watching the lights flicker in Grandma's living room. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight they hurt. I couldn't just wait anymore. I had to confront them. I texted Marcus, Alicia, and Loretta, telling them to meet me at the house the next morning. "We need to talk," I wrote. "All of us." The next day they came, each of them pretending it was just another conversation. Grandma sat quietly in her chair, her hands clasped together. The tension was unbearable. I placed all the documents I'd collected on the table. The forged papers, the notary statement, the stolen property records. Their faces went pale as I laid out every piece of evidence. "Tell me the truth," I said, my voice shaking. "Why did you do this?" For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus finally looked up, his jaw tight, his voice low. "You think you know everything," he said. "But you don't know what Grandma asked us to do." His words hung in the air like thunder waiting to strike. Grandma looked up sharply, confusion flashing across her face. "What are you talking about?" she asked. Marcus hesitated, his eyes flickering toward Loretta. Alicia reached out, putting a hand on his arm as if warning him to stop. But he didn't. "She told us to protect her," he said quietly. "To make sure the house and everything else stayed in the family, even if you tried to take it away." The room went still. I turned to Grandma stunned. "Is that true?" I asked softly. She shook her head, tears filling her eyes. "I never said that. I just wanted peace in this family." Marcus looked torn, caught between guilt and anger. Loretta's expression hardened, her voice trembling as she said, "You were never supposed to find out like this." That was the moment I realized the truth was about to explode, and nothing in our family would ever be the same again. The air in the room grew heavier. Grandma's breathing quickened. Marcus's hands clenched. Loretta's eyes darted between us all, like she was calculating her next move. And then, before anyone could say another word, the front door suddenly swung open, revealing someone none of us expected to see standing there. Everything stopped. The truth we'd all been circling was finally about to come out. When the front door swung open, the sound hit the room like a thunderclap. Every head turned at once, and for a few long seconds no one said a word. Standing there in the doorway was Grandma's longtime attorney, Mr. Bennett, a man none of us had seen in months. His gray suit was damp from the rain, and his eyes scanned the room with quiet authority. He looked serious, like someone who'd just walked into the middle of something he already knew too much about. "Good morning," he said slowly, closing the door behind him. His voice was calm, but the air around him felt tense. "I think it's time we clear up a few things." Loretta's face went pale. Marcus froze, his mouth slightly open. Alicia glanced between them nervously, her hand tightening around her phone. I could tell whatever was about to come out wasn't something they'd planned for. Mr. Bennett placed a thick brown folder on the table, the same one where all my documents were spread out. "I got your call," he said, looking straight at me. "I reviewed everything you sent." Then he turned his gaze toward the others. "But what I discovered this morning changes everything." No one breathed. He opened the folder and pulled out several papers. "Your grandmother came to see me 6 months ago," he began. "She wanted to update her will, but she also wanted to make sure the property you bought for her was protected, legally untouchable. What she didn't know," he paused, glancing at Loretta, "was that someone had already filed a false claim transferring that house into a family trust under her name. That trust was created by you." Loretta's lips trembled, but she didn't speak. "I did what she asked," Mr. Bennett continued. "I created a backup trust in her name and yours," he nodded toward me, "to secure ownership if anything happened to the original deed. But 2 weeks later, someone accessed my office's online system and replaced that backup file with a forged one. Same format, same wording, but with different beneficiaries." Alicia's face drained of color. Marcus rubbed his forehead, looking like he wanted to disappear. "So you're saying someone hacked into your system?" I asked quietly. "Yes," Mr. Bennett said. "And it was traced back to a local IP address, one belonging to someone in this very room." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could hear the soft ticking of Grandma's old wall clock, each second stretching longer than the last. Then he looked directly at Alicia. "It was you." Her eyes widened. "What?" "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice rising. "I don't even know how to do that." But Mr. Bennett pulled out a printed report. "Your email address and login credentials were used to authorize the upload. I'm guessing you didn't do it alone." His eyes shifted toward Marcus. My brother's jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about," he muttered. "Oh, I think I do," Mr. Bennet said calmly. "And I also know why." He took a deep breath before speaking again. "Your grandmother's late husband left behind more than land and small investments. He had a hidden insurance policy, worth nearly $2 million, that matured this year. The payout was supposed to go directly to her. But someone intercepted the communication from the insurance company and changed the beneficiary information. I felt the air leave my lungs. "You mean?" "Yes," he interrupted softly. "The funds were redirected into that same family trust." My heart pounded in my chest. That was the missing piece, the reason they were so desperate to control everything. This wasn't just about property anymore. It was about money, old secrets, and betrayal that ran deeper than any of us could have imagined. Grandma looked completely lost. "I don't understand," she whispered. "How could this happen?" Marcus finally spoke, his voice low and shaky. "I didn't know about the insurance," he said. "Alicia said it was just about protecting the family's assets." I turned to him, my anger boiling. "Protecting the family? By stealing from your own grandmother?" Alicia snapped. "You don't get it. You think you're the only one who cares about her, but you're not. You bought that house to play the hero to make yourself look good. You never asked anyone else how they felt about it." Her voice cracked, but her words only made my stomach twist harder. "You changed the deed," I said coldly. "You lied. And now you're trying to justify it." Mr. Bennet lifted a hand, silencing everyone. "We can argue later. What matters now is that the trust isn't finalized yet, but it will be soon. Once it's processed, all the funds and the property will legally belong to the trust under Loretta's control." Loretta's eyes snapped toward him. "That's not true," she said quickly, though her voice shook. "I was only trying to keep things organized." He sighed. "You had good intentions once, maybe. But when greed gets involved, intentions don't matter anymore." Grandma covered her face with her hands. "I never wanted this," she whispered. "I just wanted peace." The room felt heavy with guilt and silence. I could see the weight of it all sinking into her, the people she loved turning against each other over money she didn't even know she had. Then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Mr. Bennet said something that made the air go cold. "There's one more thing you should know. Someone filed a report claiming your grandmother was unfit to manage her own finances. If that claim goes through, she'll lose legal control of everything, including this house." I froze. "Who would do that?" He looked at the table for a moment before speaking. "The report was filed by her power of attorney." Grandma's eyes widened. "My what?" Mr. Bennet looked straight at Loretta. "That would be you." The room erupted. Grandma gasped, Marcus shouted something I couldn't even make out, and Loretta stood, her face flushed red with panic. "I did it to protect her," she cried. "She's getting older, she forgets things." "You mean you did it to protect yourself?" I said sharply. "Because you knew this was all about to fall apart." The air was electric, the tension thick enough to choke on. No one moved. No one dared to. Mr. Bennet closed the folder slowly. "We don't have much time," he said. "If that claim is processed, it's over. The only way to stop it is if your grandmother rescinds your authority and signs the revocation paperwork immediately." Loretta's face drained of color. "She can't do that," she whispered. "Yes," I said, standing up. "She can." But before Grandma could even reach for the pen, the lights flickered. A low rumble of thunder echoed outside. The power went out completely, plunging the room into darkness. Someone moved in the shadows, fast. Papers rustled, a chair scraped, and then came the unmistakable sound of the folder being snatched off the table. "Marcus!" I shouted, but I couldn't see anything. The rain outside grew louder, wind slamming against the windows. When the lights finally came back on, the folder, and all the evidence inside, was gone. Loretta and Alicia stood frozen, but Marcus was nowhere in sight. The front door was open, rain blowing in from the storm. And in that single moment, I realized he hadn't just run away. He was taking everything with him. The fight for my grandmother's house and our family's truth had just reached its breaking point. The storm outside raged on, lightning flashing through the windows as thunder rolled across the sky. Grandma sat trembling on the couch, clutching her shawl, while I stood frozen, staring at the open front door where Marcus had disappeared. The sound of rain pounding against the porch mixed with the sharp echo of my heart racing. Everything had spiraled so fast, too fast, and now the truth, the money, and the last bit of family trust were vanishing into the night with him. I grabbed my jacket and ran outside, ignoring Loretta's shouting behind me. The rain soaked through my clothes in seconds, but I didn't care. I saw faint headlights at the end of the driveway, the sound of Marcus's car tires screeching against the wet gravel. I yelled his name, but the wind drowned my voice. The car sped off, leaving a trail of water and mud behind. I stood there, shaking, realizing I couldn't catch him alone. Mr. Bennett came running out behind me, umbrella flipping backward in the storm. "We have to call the police," he shouted. I nodded, though part of me hesitated. Marcus was my brother. As furious as I was, I didn't want this to end with handcuffs or worse. But then I thought about Grandma, how she had worked her whole life, saved every dime, and trusted us with her future. That trust had been broken, and if I didn't act now, everything she had could be gone by morning. By the time the police arrived, the storm had begun to calm. The officers took our statements, and Mr. Bennett handed over the digital records he'd backed up before coming to the house. "The paper copies are gone," he said grimly, "but the electronic files are safe on a secure drive." Relief washed over me. For the first time that night there was hope. The next morning the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. Grandma had barely slept. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at her cup of tea. "I don't know how this happened," she whispered. "My own family turning against each other like this." I sat beside her, placing a hand on hers. "It's not your fault, Grandma. None of this is. Marcus made his choice, but we're going to fix this." Around noon my phone buzzed. It was the police. They'd found Marcus. He had driven to a storage unit on the edge of town, trying to move the stolen documents out before anyone could stop him. When they confronted him, he didn't resist. They brought him in quietly, soaked and defeated. I felt a strange mix of anger and pity. This was my brother, the same person who used to share his last cookie with me as a kid, now sitting in a holding cell because of greed and manipulation. Later that day Mr. Bennett and I went down to the station. Marcus looked up when we entered, eyes red and tired. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said softly. "Alicia said it was just a way to protect the family money, that you were trying to cut everyone else out." I shook my head slowly. "No, Marcus. I was trying to protect Grandma. You were supposed to help me, not destroy everything." He sighed deeply. "Alicia told me the insurance payout was ours by right. She said Grandma didn't need all that money, that she'd just waste it." His voice cracked. I believed her. It hurt to hear, but I could see the truth in his eyes. He wasn't evil, just easily swayed. The real manipulation had come from someone else. When we returned home, Loretta and Alicia were waiting in the living room. Alicia looked composed, too calm for someone whose husband had just been arrested. Loretta looked shaken but silent. Mr. Bennett placed a set of documents on the table. "The electronic records confirmed that Alicia orchestrated the entire scheme," he said evenly. "She used your name, Loretta, and Marcus's account access to file everything." Alicia's expression didn't change. "You think you can pin this all on me?" she said coolly. "You have no proof I did it alone." But Mr. Bennett only smiled faintly. "Actually, we do." He pressed play on a small recorder. Alicia's voice filled the room, her recorded phone call with the notary she tried to bribe to fast-track the property transfer. Every word was clear. Every lie, every plan. Her calm mask cracked instantly. She turned to Loretta. "You told me it would work. You said she'd never find out." Loretta gasped. "I told you to stay out of it. You promised you'd stop." The room fell into chaos, shouting, crying, everyone trying to talk over each other. But Grandma stood slowly, her voice cutting through it all. "Enough." Her tone was quiet, but powerful enough to silence the room. She looked at each of them, her children, her grandchildren, her family. "I spent my whole life believing love was stronger than greed. I see now that sometimes love isn't enough." She turned to Mr. Bennett. "I want the papers fixed. I want my house back in my name, and I want everything else donated. I don't want this money tearing us apart anymore." I was stunned. "Grandma, you don't have to." She shook her head. "I do. If this is what wealth does to people, I'd rather have peace." By the next week, Mr. Bennett helped finalize everything. The deed was officially restored, the fraudulent trust dissolved, and the insurance payout secured in a protected fund under Grandma's name. Marcus was released on the condition that he testify against Alicia, who now faced charges for fraud and forgery. Loretta quietly moved out of the house and decided to live with her daughter upstate, leaving behind a note of apology that felt both sad and overdue. It should have felt like the end of the storm, but it didn't. Something about it still felt unfinished. A few days later, I was sorting through Grandma's mail when I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper, a printed screenshot of a bank statement showing a large withdrawal from Grandma's account. The transaction had been made 2 months ago, long before any of this started. At the bottom, there was a short handwritten note that made my heart stop. Check the hidden account. It's not over. There was no signature, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Marcus's. I looked up from the letter, feeling the weight of uncertainty settle over me again. Maybe justice had been served. Maybe the truth had come out. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still buried, something even Grandma didn't know about. The house was quiet, peaceful even, but the silence now carried an edge. Somewhere out there, another secret waited to surface. And I had a feeling this story, the one that started with love, betrayal, and a $3 million home, was far from finished. For days after finding that letter, I couldn't shake the uneasiness that sat heavy in my chest. The storm had passed, the legal battles were settling, and Grandma's house finally felt calm again, but the quiet was deceptive. Marcus's note replayed in my mind over and over. Check the hidden account. It's not over. It was like a whisper that refused to fade. I wanted to believe everything had ended, that the lies, the court filings, the late-night phone calls, and the tension tearing our family apart were behind us. But my gut told me Marcus knew something we didn't. One morning, while Grandma was resting, I went to her small study at the back of the house. The scent of lavender and old paper filled the air. On her bookshelf sat an old metal box I hadn't noticed before, small, gray, with a faint engraving of my late grandfather's initials. I hesitated, then gently pulled it down. Inside were a few family photos, some old bills, and an envelope labeled, "Emergency Documents." I opened it slowly, my heart beating faster as I unfolded the papers. There it was. A bank account number I had never seen before, along with a deposit slip from nearly 30 years ago. The balance was enormous, over $1.5 million. The date matched back to when my grandfather's business was still thriving. For decades, no one had mentioned this account. It wasn't in the will, not in any of Grandma's paperwork, and not even Mr. Bennett had known about it. I drove straight to the bank with the documents. The clerk took one look and disappeared for a few minutes before returning with a manager. After confirming my identity and Grandma's power of attorney documents, the manager looked both surprised and impressed. "This account has been dormant for decades," he explained. "But it's active and it's earning interest. Whoever opened it set it up under a secondary name, your grandmother's maiden name. That's why it never showed up in the system under her current records." Suddenly made sense. My grandfather must have opened it quietly, maybe as a safety net in case anything ever happened to the family's main finances. He had left behind more than we realized, not just money but protection. That afternoon I told Grandma what I'd found. She sat in silence, her eyes filling with tears. "I remember now," she said softly. "He told me once that he wanted to leave something untouched, something that couldn't be fought over. He said one day when the time was right, it would find its way home." She smiled faintly through her tears. I guess he was right. We used part of that hidden fund to secure the house under a stronger legal trust, one that no one could tamper with again. Mr. Bennett helped us finalize every document, triple sealing it against any loopholes or interference. The rest, Grandma insisted, would go into a scholarship foundation for underprivileged youth in our community. "If money can destroy families," she said one evening, "then maybe it can also rebuild others." Marcus eventually reached out after a few weeks. His tone was calmer, humble. He'd taken a plea deal, avoiding a harsher sentence in exchange for his cooperation. He wanted to apologize to Grandma directly. At first, she was hesitant, her heart too fragile for another heartbreak, but when he showed up one Sunday morning, drenched in regret and tears, she opened her arms and hugged him. "Family isn't perfect," she whispered to him, "but forgiveness keeps it from falling apart completely." It wasn't instant healing, but it was a start. Marcus began attending counseling and volunteering at a local shelter, trying to rebuild his life from the pieces left behind. As for Alicia, she faced her consequences. She filed for divorce quietly and moved out of state. No one heard much about her afterward, and maybe that was for the best. Loretta's relationship with Grandma also slowly mended. She started visiting again, cooking Sunday dinners, bringing laughter back into the house that had felt empty for months. It wasn't like old times, but it was something real, something that felt human and hopeful. As the months passed, Grandma's health improved. The stress that had weighed her down seemed to lift with every peaceful morning. We'd sit on the porch together, sipping tea as she told stories from her younger days. Sometimes she'd pause, glance at the garden blooming in front of us and smile. "You know," she'd say, This house isn't just walls and bricks. It's a reminder that love always has to be stronger than greed. Her words stayed with me. I realized that this whole ordeal, buying the house, losing it, fighting to get it back, wasn't really about money at all. It was about what we value when everything else falls apart. Family. Integrity. The courage to stand up for what's right even when it hurts. A few weeks later, as I was organizing old files, I found one last letter tucked inside an envelope in Grandma's drawer. It was from my grandfather, dated years before he passed. In it, he wrote about the same hidden account I'd found, how he'd set it aside, for the person who proves that family means more than fortune. I smiled, realizing his words had found their way through time to the one moment they were meant to. That night I sat outside, the soft hum of crickets filling the air. The house glowed warmly behind me, every light a symbol of survival and peace. Grandma was safe. Our family, though scarred, was still standing. The pain we went through had shaped us, but it had also taught us resilience. I thought about how easily trust can be broken and how hard it is to rebuild, but how powerful it is when we try. This house, the $3 million home that had nearly torn us apart, had become something deeper. It was no longer just a luxury or a symbol of success. It was a promise, a story of redemption and second chances. Before heading inside, I looked up at the stars, thinking of my grandfather. "We did it," I whispered. "Your promise came full circle." Inside, Grandma was humming softly in the kitchen, stirring her evening tea. Marcus was helping her with the dishes, and Loretta was laughing at something on TV. The sound was gentle, real, full of life again. It wasn't perfect, but it was family. Later, as I tucked the last of the legal papers into a drawer, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The battles were over. The lies had been uncovered. The house, the money, the trust, all of it had found its rightful place. But more than that, we had found our way back to each other. And in the quiet of that moment, I realized the greatest inheritance my grandmother had ever given us wasn't her home or her fortune. It was her strength, her forgiveness, and her belief that no matter how deep the betrayal, love could still rebuild what was broken. As the lights dimmed and the night settled in, I closed my eyes, letting the peace of the house wrap around me like a promise kept. For the first time in a long while, everything felt whole. The story that began with greed and deception ended with grace, and that was worth more than any house or inheritance could ever be.